3 years ago, James lost everything, his freedom, his reputation, his future, because of one lie. But the system doesn't care about innocence. It cares about power. And that night, power won. James has spent every second of the last 3 years searching for the truth. And now he's found it. The lie that destroyed him? It's about to explode. And the ones who buried the truth? They have no idea what's coming. Stay with us to uncover the truth. And ask yourself, what would you do if your life was destroyed by a lie? And let us know where you are watching from in the comment below. It was supposed to be just another quiet day, but everything changed in an instant. James sat behind the wheel of the black luxury sedan, the familiar hum of the engine surrounding him. He'd been Mr. Harrington's driver for nearly a decade now. The billionaire had trusted him with everything, his family, his business, even his reputation. James was the man everyone in the house could rely on. He was loyal. He was discreet. He'd seen it all, but never once spoke a word. But that all came crashing down in a single moment, a moment that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The house was busy that afternoon. Mr. Harrington was in a meeting with potential investors, and James was waiting outside, as usual, watching the world pass him by. Then, Emily came rushing out of the front door. Her father's voice could be heard shouting from inside. The door slammed shut behind her, and she stormed down the steps, eyes wild with anger. "James," Emily shouted, her voice sharp and demanding. "I need you." He was startled, but he did as he was told, opening the car door for her. Emily, always so poised and beautiful, looked anything but today. Her face was red, her makeup smudged from the tears she'd been crying, and her dress clung to her body as if it was suffocating her. She was furious. "What's going on?" James asked, stepping back as she entered the car. "Get me out of here, now," Emily snapped, looking over her shoulder as if expecting her father to come running after her. James hesitated for a moment. He knew better than to get involved in the family's issues. But Emily was different. She was the boss's daughter, and when she asked for something, it was usually granted without question. Without a word, he got in the driver's seat and started the engine. The air was thick with tension as they drove in silence. Emily kept her gaze fixed out the window, and James couldn't help but glance at her in the rearview mirror. The anger was still there, burning in her eyes. "What happened, Emily?" James asked, breaking the silence. Emily finally spoke, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and pain. "My father is controlling me. He won't let me live my own life. I've had enough of his rules, his demands. I've tried to do everything he wanted, and now he's pushing me too far." James didn't know what to say. He wasn't in a position to comment on the family struggles, but he could sense that this was different. There was a desperation in her voice that he hadn't heard before. But then, as they turned a corner, the situation took a sharp, unexpected twist. Emily looked at him with an intensity that made him uneasy. "I'll make him pay," she whispered under her breath, almost as if speaking to herself. "I'll make him regret ever trying to control me." James' stomach twisted. What was she planning? The car slowed to a stop at a red light, and that's when it happened. Emily suddenly turned, her face contorting in a way James had never seen before. "You," she gasped, eyes wide with fury. "You touched me?" James froze, his heart racing. The words hit him like a physical blow. What was she saying? His mind couldn't process it. "I'll tell everyone," Emily continued, her voice shaking with false sincerity. "I'll tell them everything. You assaulted me." James was in shock. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Emily, the young woman he'd known for years, the one who always got her way, was accusing him of something he didn't do. The accusation was as outrageous as it was damaging. But when someone like Emily, who is beautiful, wealthy, and well-known, makes a claim like that, no one asks questions. It was her word against his. And the world always sided with the privileged. Before he knew it, the police were at his door. Emily had made a formal statement, and James was arrested on charges of assault. His life, which had always seemed so secure, began to unravel before his eyes. The news spread like wildfire. The headlines screamed his guilt. Billionaire's driver arrested for assault on daughter. James tried to protest. He tried to tell anyone who would listen that Emily had lied. But the world didn't care. Mr. Harrington, his employer, the man who had trusted him with his life, turned his back on him. "I can't believe this," Mr. Harrington had said, his face twisted with disgust. "James, how could you do this to my family?" The words stung. They felt like a betrayal, the deepest cut James had ever felt. And it wasn't just Mr. Harrington who abandoned him. His friends, colleagues, even his own family, all of them believed the lie. No one stood by him. His trial was a blur. The public didn't want to hear the truth. They wanted drama, they wanted scandal, and they got it. They heard Emily's side of the story. Their golden girl who could do no wrong. They didn't see the girl who had cried wolf before, who had manipulated people for years to get what she wanted. The judge didn't care about James's innocence. The damage was done. He was sentenced to prison, despite all the evidence pointing to his innocence. He lost everything: his job, his family, his reputation. His world came crashing down in an instant. Now, James sat in his prison cell, the cold concrete walls pressing in on him. The bars of the cell looked like they would never open again. He could hear the distant sounds of other inmates, but he felt completely alone. His mind kept replaying the same thought over and over. This isn't over. He hadn't given up. He couldn't. He knew the truth. And someday someone would hear it. But for now, all he had were the walls, the silence, and the rage burning inside him. Emily had taken everything from him, but she wouldn't win. No matter what it took, he would prove his innocence. It was only a matter of time before the truth came to light. And when it did, Emily would know what hit her. As James sat in the dim light of his cell, he whispered the words that would echo in his mind for the rest of his life. This isn't over. After 3 long years behind bars, James was finally released. The door to the prison cell clanged shut behind him, and the world on the other side felt foreign. He stepped into the blinding light of day, squinting as his eyes adjusted. The air smelled different, fresher, but heavy with the weight of what had been lost. His life, once simple and predictable, was now shattered beyond recognition. The past 3 years had stolen everything from him. His job, his reputation, his family, all gone. And the worst part? No one cared that he was innocent. To the world, he was just a convicted criminal, no different from the others walking out of prison that day. James tried to hold on to the hope that somehow, somewhere, someone would believe him. He hadn't forgotten the truth. He hadn't forgotten Emily's lies. They'd haunted him in his cell. But now, with his release, it was time to do what he should have done from the beginning: fight. He had no money, no friends, and no support. But he had one thing left: his determination. He would clear his name, even if it meant going up against everyone who'd turned their backs on him. The moment James walked out of that prison, he made a vow. He would get revenge on the one person who had ruined his life: Emily. James wasted no time. With the little money he had left, he rented a small apartment and set up his base of operations. His first mission was clear: uncover the truth. Emily had framed him with such precision, but there had to be something. She couldn't have been that perfect, could she? He began researching her life, every detail, every move she'd made. The deeper he dug, the more disgusted he became. It was like peeling back layers of lies, one after the other. She'd always been good at manipulating people, using her charm to get what she wanted. But as James uncovered her past, he realized just how deep the lies went. She had lied about so many things, about what happened that day, about her relationships, and even about her own family. The more James uncovered, the more certain he became. Emily had fabricated the entire story. She had made it all up. And she'd done it because she knew she could get away with it. But there was one thing that gnawed at him. Why had she accused him specifically? What had he done to make her target him? James had no answers yet, but he wasn't about to stop searching. Every night, he would sit at his computer, piecing together the puzzle. It wasn't easy, but James was patient. He had nothing but time now. And with every lead he followed, the truth began to take shape. Meanwhile, Emily was living a life most people could only dream of. The lies she'd told were buried, forgotten by everyone except James. No one remembered the accusations she'd made. She was a darling of high society now, engaged to a wealthy socialite and constantly in the tabloids, attending charity galas and luxury events. To the world, she was a perfect princess with a perfect life. James watched from the sidelines, helpless, as Emily continued to flaunt her happiness. He had nothing left to lose, and yet, it felt like the world was rewarding her for what she had done to him. She had gotten away with it. But what James didn't know was that Emily's life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. Beneath the facade of elegance and wealth, there were cracks. She was playing a game, one she couldn't control. James was about to discover just how far her lies went. It was late one night when James found the breakthrough he'd been looking for. His research had led him to a man, someone from Emily's past, someone she had been involved with. His name was Victor Darnell, a dangerous criminal with ties to organized crime. The man had a reputation that sent chills down anyone's spine. No one dared cross him, not even the law. As James dug deeper into Victor's life, he discovered something shocking. Emily had been having an affair with him. The truth was darker than James could have ever imagined. She had been using him, using her charm to manipulate him just as she had manipulated everyone else. And now, she was engaged to another man. Victor was just a footnote in her life. But the secret was a ticking time bomb. If anyone ever found out about her affair with him, it would destroy her reputation. James was stunned. He had never expected this. Emily, the perfect, innocent girl, had been living a double life. She had been playing with fire, and sooner or later, it would all come crashing down. But James wasn't finished. He had one final move to make. The truth would come out, and Emily wouldn't be able to stop it. James sat at his desk, staring at the screen in front of him. He had all the evidence he needed. Victor Darnell's criminal past, the affair with Emily, the lies she'd told. Everything was there, ready to be exposed. But James wasn't ready to make the final move just yet. Instead, he sent an anonymous message to Emily, one that would send a chill down her spine. The truth always comes out. And with that, he leaned back in his chair, watching the clock tick as he waited for her reaction. James had waited for this moment. After everything that had happened, everything Emily had done to him, he knew the time had come to take control. His life might never be the same, but that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was making sure Emily understood the consequences of her lies. The first step in his plan was subtle. No one could know it was him. He wasn't about to make the same mistake again and get caught in the crossfire. James started small, planting whispers in the right ears. He leaked rumors about Emily's past, stories of her manipulations, of the lies she had told to get ahead. It wasn't hard. People loved gossip and they loved a scandal. Within days, the whispers turned into murmurs, and the murmurs turned into full-blown stories. Emily didn't know who to trust anymore. She had always been in control of the narrative, but now, the cracks in her perfect life were showing. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, but she had no idea who was behind it. Then came the next part of James' plan, the wedding. Emily had been planning her dream wedding for months, but James made sure that wouldn't happen. He used his connections, making sure the venue she had booked canceled, without explanation. At first, she thought it was just a mistake, until it happened again and again. The people she trusted began pulling away, and her dream wedding seemed further out of reach with every passing day. But that wasn't all. The final strike was the one that would make her world implode. James made sure Emily's fiancé got a hold of the truth about her affair with Victor Darnell. The man who had once been Emily's secret was now a public disgrace, and Emily's lies were finally exposed to the one person who mattered most. Emily was left reeling. Her life, once so perfectly curated, was slipping through her fingers. She didn't know who was behind it, but she knew someone was out to destroy her. The paranoia set in. Every time she looked over her shoulder, she felt eyes on her. She couldn't escape the feeling that someone knew all of her darkest secrets. As the days passed, Emily's world began to crumble. She had always been the star, the one everyone admired and envied. But now, she was the target of a silent attack. Her reputation was slipping away, and she couldn't stop it. Her wedding plans were in ruins. No venue would take her seriously anymore. Her fiancé, once so in love, had started questioning everything. The rumors about her affair with Victor had spread like wildfire. Even her friends, the ones she thought she could trust, were backing away, unsure whether they wanted to be associated with someone so damaged. Emily had always been the one in control. She had always known how to twist situations to her advantage. But now, nothing worked. She couldn't talk her way out of this one. No matter how hard she tried, her life was spiraling downward. She started becoming paranoid, feeling like she was being watched at every corner. The whispers, the rumors, they weren't stopping. The lies she had once used to get ahead were now coming back to haunt her. But she couldn't figure out who was behind it. Who could have turned her perfect world into this nightmare? Emily became a shell of her former self. The once confident, spoiled young woman now wandered the streets, unsure of who she was anymore. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't trust anyone. And no one seemed to care. No one except for James, the man she had ruined. James had been waiting for this. Every part of his plan had led to this moment. He knew he had to face her, confront her with everything he had learned, and expose her for the person she really was. He arranged a meeting, a private setting. He knew Emily wouldn't expect him to show up, not like this. She had been so consumed by her paranoia that she would never have guessed he was the one pulling the strings. When they met, there was a coldness between them. Emily was different, haggard, anxious. She could barely look him in the eye. "James," she said, her voice shaking. "What do you want?" James stood still, his eyes locked onto hers. He hadn't spoken to her since that day, since she had ruined his life with her lies. But now, he wasn't the man she remembered. He was something else now. "You've been running from the truth for a long time, Emily," James said, his voice low but steady. "You've hurt people, manipulated them, and you thought you could get away with it. But now, it's time for you to face what you've done." He pulled out a folder, the evidence of her lies, her affair, the ruined lives. Every single detail. "You've spent years covering up your mess, but it's all here. All the proof. Your lies, your manipulations, everything. And now, you have nowhere to hide." Emily's face went pale as she stared at the documents. No, this can't be true. It's not what you think." But James wasn't listening. "You think you can keep lying and getting away with it? You took everything from me, Emily. My job, my family, my reputation. And now it's your turn." Emily fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Please, James," she begged, her voice cracking with desperation. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was scared. I just wanted to get away from him. I didn't know what else to do." James looked down at her, his face cold. He had no sympathy for her anymore. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. "You don't get to beg for forgiveness," he said, his tone harsh. "Not after what you've done. You took everything from me. And now, it's time for you to face the consequences." James stood up and turned away, walking toward the door. He stopped for a moment, looking back at Emily, once the darling of high society, now reduced to a broken shell. "This is just the beginning," he whispered before walking out. The next day, James did the unthinkable. He sent the evidence, every detail, every lie, every betrayal, to the media. The story spread faster than wildfire. The headlines blared with the truth. Emily's affair, her lies, her manipulations. The perfect princess was no more. Her reputation, the one she had so carefully built, was shattered beyond repair. Her father, the man who had stood by her through everything, disowned her. She was left with nothing. James sat in his small apartment, watching the chaos unfold. He had done it. The truth had come out, and Emily was no longer in control. For the first time in 3 years, James felt a sense of justice. The scales had finally been balanced. But as Emily's life fell apart, James knew there was still more to do. He had won the battle, but the war was far from over. As the media continued to report on Emily's downfall, James whispered to himself, "This isn't over. Not yet." The world had changed in so many ways since James had walked out of prison. He had rebuilt his life, step by step, with the pieces of a past that had been taken from him. But the scars were still there. They weren't visible to most people, but James felt them every day. The way people looked at him, the whispers that still followed him in quiet rooms. His name had been cleared, but the damage had been done. Every day, James worked hard to make sure that he didn't just survive. He had to prove he could thrive. He found a new job as a driver, a simple one. Nothing flashy. He didn't need flash anymore.
He didn't want it.
All he needed was peace, and that seemed far out of reach. The truth had come out, and Emily's lies had been exposed. The satisfaction of that had given James a sense of justice, but now that it was over, he realized something unsettling. Revenge hadn't brought him the peace he'd expected. The anger, the bitterness, it still lingered. When he looked in the mirror, he saw a man who had won, but at what cost? James had done everything he could to make Emily pay for the pain she had caused him, but now, as he sat in his quiet apartment, he felt emptier than ever. He had gotten what he wanted. The world had seen the truth. But was that enough? Could he really move on from everything? He tried to keep his focus on the present, one foot in front of the other. But the past had a way of creeping up on him, haunting him when he least expected it. Across town, Emily was living a life far different from the one she once had. The high society parties, the luxuries, the endless praise, those were all distant memories now. Emily had been torn apart by the truth. Once the center of attention, now she was invisible. She worked a menial job at a small cafe, serving coffee to customers who barely looked up from their phones when she placed their orders. It was a far cry from the life she had dreamed of. Her former friends had all abandoned her, and her fiancé had left, disgusted by the truth about her affair. But it wasn't just the loss of her high life that weighed on her. It was the weight of what she had done to James. Every night, when she lay in bed, her mind would drift back to the day she had ruined his life. She couldn't escape it. The guilt consumed her, eating away at her from the inside. People whispered when she walked into a room now. They recognized her from the scandal, from the media. They saw the broken woman who had once been the queen of everything and had fallen so far. Emily no longer had the luxury of pretending. She had lost her family, her reputation, and her place in the world. She was alone, and she had no one to blame but herself. James sat in his apartment late one evening, his mind racing. The news of Emily's fall from grace had reached him, just as he knew it would. But now that she was gone from the public eye, now that she had nothing left, James found himself questioning everything. He had won. Emily had lost everything. But now, after all the pain and destruction, was he truly at peace? He had been so sure that revenge would heal the wounds, but the emptiness he felt was a constant reminder that things weren't as simple as they seemed. He thought getting back at Emily would give him a sense of closure, of triumph. But instead, it felt like the cycle of pain would never end. He had hurt her, yes, but was that really justice? Or was he just perpetuating the same kind of cruelty she had inflicted on him? James stared out of the window, his reflection merging with the darkness outside. He had done what he set out to do. He had exposed Emily's lies and torn down the life she had built on deceit. But was that enough? His fingers brushed the small stack of papers on his desk, evidence of his fight for justice, the years he had spent in prison, the scars that would never heal. Revenge had brought him some sense of satisfaction, but it hadn't brought him peace. And now, as he looked back at everything, he couldn't help but wonder, had it all been worth it? The doorbell rang, pulling James from his thoughts. He wasn't expecting anyone, but when he opened the door, there it was, an envelope, simple and plain. No return address. Just his name written in hurried, shaky handwriting. His heart skipped a beat. He knew who it was from before he even opened it. Emily. He tore open the envelope, unfolding the letter with a sense of dread. The words were clumsy, almost as if she had written them in a panic. James, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know I am sorry. I wish I could take back what I did to you, but I can't. I ruined your life, and I can never fix that. All I can do is beg you to forgive me, to find a way to move forward, even if it means never speaking again. Please, James. Please. Emily. James stared at the letter, his fingers trembling slightly. The words felt like a lifeline, but also like a weight he wasn't sure he could carry. He had done what he had set out to do. She had been exposed, her life shattered. And yet now, in the silence that followed, he realized how much of him was still torn between anger and something else, something more complicated. His mind raced with thoughts of everything she had done to him, everything he had lost because of her. But there, in her desperate plea for forgiveness, was something else, something that felt almost like humanity. Could he forgive her? Or had the damage been done beyond repair? James took a deep breath, holding the letter in his hands, staring at it as if it could somehow tell him what to do. And as he sat there, staring at the words, the final words of the letter echoed in his mind, leaving him to wonder, could he ever forgive her? Or was this the last tie that would forever bind him to a past he couldn't escape? Was James' revenge truly justified? Or did he end up becoming the very person he despised? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Do you believe revenge ever really brings peace? Or does it just keep the cycle of pain going? If you were in James' shoes, how would you have handled things? Would you have sought revenge? Or tried to forgive? Share your thoughts with us, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more gripping stories like this.